The first time Tommy Simmons called me up to ask me if I would talk to you, I said no. The second time he called me up, I said no again. For several reasons. One is he wanted me to talk about the history of banking in Grapevine, and I didn't know anything about the history of banking in Grapevine. For another thing, there's a reason why the Box family banking tradition has died out with my generation, and you're looking at it right now. The third thing that kind of kept me from wanting to do this is that around our household when I was a kid, every single, as I remember it, every single supper time conversation began with this warning. Now you can't talk to anybody about this. Which is not a good way to launch a person onto a public speaking career. But anyway, in the end, I decided to take up Tommy's invitation. He was persistent, some might say annoyingly persistent. It wasn't really because of anything he said, it was because of something I remembered my father saying many years ago. When I was a kid, Dad used to talk about the old geezers in town, and he would joke about how they had old-timers disease, which I thought was very funny then. But recently it has occurred to me that the people he was talking about then were probably about the same age I am now. Which means, kind of by definition, I am now historical, and therefore by extension, anything that I say tonight has to be historical. So, the history of banking in Grapevine, let's begin. Let's start with a little background. After the Civil War, state banks popped up all over Texas. They were largely associated with the cotton industry and other mercantile business, and they were completely unsupervised and unregulated. In other words, pretty much like the banking industry today. Now, as to some of my personal memories of growing up as a child of First National Bank, as a child of Joe and Cecilia Box. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. As I said before, if you grew up in my family, you were going to work at the bank sooner or later, whether you wanted to or not. And my first job at the bank was the summer I was turning 16. I was just finishing school, and I was looking forward to one of those long, hot, lazy summers in Grapevine that we all loved as kids. And the day after school was out, I got a call from Harold Caker, who was vice president of the bank at that time, informing me that I would be reporting to work on Monday morning. His daughter Linda, who was my classmate, also got the same call. Interestingly enough, my father never said a word to me until after I had been hired, quote unquote. I understand the competition was fierce for those jobs. You can imagine. My brother Jim, who is now an orthopedist in Fort Worth and couldn't be here tonight, also went through the pipeline and had some very vivid experiences. When Jim was 15, he was hired to be a bank teller. Now, a little sidebar here. When my brother was 15, he was hired to be a teller. When I was 15, I was hired to be an assistant to the bookkeepers. If you would like to draw any conclusions about the state of equal rights in that time and that place, I leave you to your own conclusions. But be that as it may, Jim was 15 and he was a bank teller. Now in the banking business, if you had any exposure to that, you know that Fridays are generally the biggest day. And when a Friday coincides with the end of the month, that's particularly so. And banks tend to run short on cash because everybody wants to cash their paycheck. So it happened that one day, on a Friday morning, Dad called Jim into his office and in typical Joe Box fashion said, "Take this check for $40,000 and go into Dallas and cash it at the Fed and come back." So my 15-year-old brother, who'd only had his driver's license about 3 months, takes a check for $40,000, goes into downtown Dallas, finds the Fed, cashes the check. Now picture They give him, in small bills, that's a lot of money, in 2 clearly marked cash bags, say Federal Reserve in large letters. And then he has to take his 2 cash bags, walk back down to the basement parking garage, and wait for his car to be brought around. A skinny 15-year-old kid with 2 clearly marked cash bags with $40,000 in it. He throws them into the trunk of his car and drives home, sweating all the way, just for sure that the cops are going to stop him for something, and he's going to have to explain how he's come by all that excess cash. I actually did a second stint working in Grapevine when sometime in the mid-70s, when I was, as they say, between careers. And at that time, I was working the drive-in teller windows. The drive-in tellers were kind of buried in the back of the bank. We couldn't actually see our customers out there. We had two-way TV, which we only used two-way when we were talking. Otherwise, we turned it off and talked about our customers. No, we didn't. But it so happened that at that time, there was a ring of check forgers. They had a circuit that they traveled between the Dallas-Fort Worth area and down to Austin and back. Every few months, they stole checks. They would move along just out of the area, write a check and cash it. And then before anyone could catch on, they moved along. So the law enforcement was always just about a step behind. But we did have the names of the stolen checks. So we knew what to look for. And sure enough, one day, the lady who was working alongside me turned off her two-way video and went, "It's him, oh my God, it's him." Well, panic spread through the bank immediately. The police were called, Grapevine police. They said, "Stall him." She did a wonderful job. They said, "We'd be right there." And they were. Now, here's where we get to the history bonus round for the evening. How many of you remember a song from the late 50s, one of those novelty songs called Little Nash Rambler? Do you remember that? For those of you who don't remember it, it was a very silly song, and the first verse starts, "While riding in my Cadillac, much to my surprise, a little Nash Rambler was following me about 1/3 my size. The guy must have wanted to pass me up because he kept on honking his horn. I'll show him that a Cadillac is not a car to scorn." I didn't hear the sound effects coming out there. Anyway, I wanted you to have that picture in your mind, the Cadillac and the little Nash Rambler, because sitting in the drive-in window, cool as a cucumber, is this check forger in a huge Lincoln Continental. The Grapevine police, perhaps not wanting to spook him, have showed up in an unmarked car. They have pulled in behind him in a Pinto. Now, a little sidebar to this is that the man whose stolen checks were in question in this particular instance was highly offended. He felt like he was a true victim because his checkbook had been stolen from a secure location where he always kept it, on the dashboard of his pickup with the window rolled down. Now, I just wanted to come to a closing point here by saying that preparing for this speech turned out to be a very meaningful thing for me, because it's 20 years ago to the month that my dad passed away. Now, those of you who remember Joe Box remember that he was a very intelligent man, and he always had something interesting to say. He would give you some perspective, he had some bit of wisdom, he would just have the one thing right to say that would make you think, and you'd walk away and kind of mull on it later and know that he'd said something important. So you can imagine that the last words my dad said to me would be very important to me and have stuck with me all these years, and they have, and I mull over them a lot and found I've really gotten a lot of perspective and inspiration and wisdom from these last words of Dad's. And so I thought it was only appropriate that maybe I would end tonight by sharing those words with you, so you too could take with you tonight a little bit of my dad's wisdom and intelligent perspective on life, and maybe that would help you as you go out through your days. So, the very last words that my father said to me when I talked to him the day before he died were this: "Can I call you back? The Cowboys are on TV."